Hi, I am going to read Chapter 1 and Treasure. The Treasure of Pelican Cove. Chapter 1, Land's End. Here we come. Jimmy walked with a bounce up and down, up and down. At the top of each bounce, he looked around the airport. I'll be the first to see Granny this time, he thought. Stop bouncing, Jimmy, Elizabeth Ann whispered. You look like a slap-happy frog. No, I don't, Jimmy said. He kept on bouncing. Mama had said to obey Elizabeth Ann on the plane. She hadn't said anything about obeying her at the airport. Jimmy! Paul grabbed at Jimmy's flapping shirt tail. Jimmy dodged and quickly bounced away. Elizabeth Ann might fuss and leave it at that. Paul wouldn't. Jimmy got in one last big bounce before Paul jerked him down. There she is, Jimmy yelled. Granny! Granny! Over here! The other passengers grinned. They moved aside as Jimmy made a beeline for a gray-haired lady. He dragged Paul along behind him. Elizabeth Ann followed, her face pink with embarrassment. Jimmy! Granny gave the freckle-faced boy a big hug. And Paul! Careful there! She said as Paul let go of Jimmy's shirt and stumbled into her. Sorry, Gran, Paul said, righting himself. Jimmy got away from me. I saw, Granny said. In a hurry to get to Land's End, aren't you, Jimmy? Yes'm, Jimmy said, beaming. Is Blackie okay? Did he miss me? Did he like the bone I sent him for Christmas? Blackie's just fine for a dog his age, Granny said. And yes, I'm sure he'll remember you. Just don't forget that Blackie is no spring chicken. Jimmy stopped, puzzled. He's not a chicken at all, Granny. She means he's getting old, Paul said, rubbing Jimmy's hair. Jimmy wiggled away. I knew that. Here's Elizabeth Ann, Granny said. She held out both hands. Let me look at you. Elizabeth Ann stood still. Ma, you've become quite a lady, Granny said. Her eyes misted. You look just like your mother did at your age. Jimmy stared at Elizabeth Ann. He frowned. She looked just like Elizabeth Ann. He opened his mouth to say so. Paul stuck an elbow in his ribs. Ow! Jimmy grunted. Is Hiram still at Land's End? Paul asked. Still there, Granny said, and still just as ornery as ever. Paul grinned. Hiram was a good caretaker, but he had a mind of his own. He and Granny disagreed on just about everything except his work. His work was better than anyone else's on the island. Granny couldn't fire him if she wanted to, and she didn't want to. I'm glad, Jimmy said. I like Hiram. So do I, son, Granny said. Couldn't get along without him, but sometimes are better left unsaid. She took them to get their bags. Then they followed her outside. She stopped beside a faded pickup. Had to borrow Hiram's pickup, Granny explained. The car's in the shop. Granny climbed into the front seat and slid neatly behind the wheel. The children squeezed in beside her as best as they could. Granny handed her big black purse to Elizabeth Ann. She settled her hat firmly on her head and smoothed her gloves on her hands. The children quickly buckled their seatbelts as she reached for the stick shift. "Hold on," Granny yelled as the motor roared. It settled into a steady rumble. The pickup lurched once as Granny backed out of the parking space. She eased into the line of the moving traffic. Jimmy hung his head out the window and licked the air. "Salt air," he yelled. Paul yanked him back. "Sit still, Jimmy. Don't bother Granny." "He's not bothering me, Paul," Granny shouted. "This truck of Hiram's could find its own way home on a dark night. Jimmy looked at Paul. "She means they drive this way a lot," Paul said. "Hold on." The three children braced themselves for the ride across the causeway. On the other side was the island where Land's End had been built. They rumbled along, close to the speed limit, without meeting many cars. After a while, the children got used to the noise of the old truck. They began to look around. "Look, Gran," Elizabeth Ann said. "A T-shirt shop. That's new, isn't it?" "So's that," Granny said, sniffing. She pointed to an area on the right. They were passing the public beach. Pelicans covered the breakwater below Fisherman's Restaurant. The children were puzzled for a moment, wondering what she meant. The Pelicans had always been there, hunting hangouts. Then, down past the restaurant, the children saw brightly painted sheds and wheels. "An amusement park!" Jimmy shouted. "Can we stop, can we?" "No, sirree," Granny said. She shifted gears and turned down the road that ran alongside the beach. "Tourist trap. Nothing but a tourist trap." The children looked back wistfully. The bright colors were hidden by the green fronds of palms. They sighed in unison. Granny glanced at them. "Well, maybe," she said, "but I'm not promising." "Thanks, Gran," they replied. They watched the road eagerly as the houses grew fewer. For a while they could see nothing but sea grape, crepe myrtle, and sea oats that surrounded the house called Land's End. "Here it is," Elizabeth Ann said. She leaned against the seatbelt to see better. The house was old, but it was neat and freshly painted. Wide steps led past the latticed ground floor to the front porch that overlooked the ocean. Its 2 stories reached almost to the top of the live oaks. On the roof was a neat widow's walk. Granny slowed down to turn into a driveway made of crushed shells and then stepped on the gas. Shells splattered from under the tires. An old man was watering the flowers beside the lattice. He jumped back wildly and dropped the hose. "Now look at that," Granny muttered. She stopped the truck and called to Hiram. "You know better than that," she called. "You've been here 20 years and I haven't run you over yet." He looked at her blankly. Then he cupped his hand behind his ear. "What?" Granny stopped the motor. "That man," she said. "I don't know why I keep him on." She stepped down onto the driveway, still talking to herself. Elizabeth Ann and Paul grinned at each other. Even Granny knew that Hiram was teasing her, but she enjoyed the joke as much as he did. The caretaker hugged the children in turn. His eyes were sparkling underneath the white eyebrows. "I got her that time, didn't I?" "Hiram," Elizabeth Ann grinned, "you shouldn't tease Granny. A body has to have some fun." Hiram said, "Now you three are here. Your Granny can have some peace. Run and stow your gear now. I'll see you later." Elizabeth Ann said quickly, "I got dibs on the front bedroom." The children charged into the house. They raced into a wide hall and up a flight of waxed stairs. Elizabeth Ann was first to the top, and she took the larger room on the left. Jimmy followed Paul into the one on the right. He dumped his things on the bed and went to the window. Down below, he saw Hiram on the beach path. Beside him, Jimmy saw a gleam of black. "Blackie!" he yelled. He leaped across the bed and charged across the room. A minute later, the front door slammed behind him, and he was running down the path to the beach.